That's like the word. That's the thing about free improv is that when you do it right, it will not be good every single time. And I acknowledge that wasn't so good. All right. Howdy, everybody. Ooh. I guess if we're gonna use the same logic that some people use, it must have been my hair that made me play badly. Huh? If anyone wants me to explain that, I'll explain it. All right. Cardo, howdy, nice to see you. Cardo asks, I have a question. Did you ever have any problem with your embouchure? If so, what was your approach to solve it? Well, interesting you might ask. So that is my history. That's how I ended up with books. Not just one book. I think you guys know this by now. I've got dozens of books. And it all started with my embouchure problems. And I don't recommend, I'm going to tell you what I did to fix it. I don't recommend this approach because I did this because I didn't have the internet, right? This was 10 years before the internet became accessible. So I had serious problems. So I'm going to tell, since you started with this, I'm going to tell you my whole story. When I was in college, in terms of chops, now my mind was advancing, but in terms of chops, if you were to curve my progress, it would look like this. And then down here at this corner, imagine a nuclear explosion. Right? I had a crash and burn semester in college. So things kept getting worse for my chops, not better. And my story is like this. I officially quit playing trumpet. Officially stopped playing trumpet. I put the horn in the case. I put the case in the closet. I got in the car. I was in El Paso at the time. I drove to Pennsylvania to see my grandparents, and then I drove to the other side of Pennsylvania to see my other grandparents. I was gone about 2 weeks. When I got back, there was a message waiting for me. This was from a friend of mine named Hello Toy. This was from a friend of mine named Ricky Malachi. And he said that a mutual friend of ours had his son killed in an accident. Would I come to the jam session that they were using to benefit them? And I thought, I've officially quit playing trumpet, but I can't not go to that jam session. And with everything I was taught, my assumption was that when I got to the jam session, I was going to sound awful because for every day that you take off, it takes 2 days to get back. And then there was that other thing, right? If I take a day off, I know it. If I take 2 days off, the guys in the band know it. If I take 3 days off, I had taken 2 weeks off. This was not going to be a pretty scenario, right? So what happened was, and for that reason, I didn't even warm up. I got there, I pulled my horn out, and I'm waiting for my turn to play. Didn't touch the horn to my lips that whole time. And when it was my turn to play, I stood up there on stage and I started playing the head. And I'm like, wait a second here. This actually sounds good. In fact, it was the best I had sounded in over a year. How can that be? And what I'm about to say, I don't want people to take the wrong way. Because I think in the past I made it sound like from that point forward, I rejected everything my teachers told me after that. That's not how it was. But it was an eye-opening moment for me when I realized that certain things that I was told just simply were not true. Because I was not supposed to even be able to play the horn. If you're supposed to sound worse when you take time off, and I was sounding so bad before the break, this should have been an absolute disaster. So I decided to tell everybody that I go. This was also dishonest. And now, as a Christian, I look back and I say it was wrong for me to do this. In fact, I think most of the tensions I have with friends in El Paso come back to this. I told them I had quit when I didn't quit. And yes, that was wrong of me to do that. But I told them I wasn't playing trumpet anymore. But I was secretly hiding and practicing and fixing stuff. And so to answer your question, I started over doing things that made sense to me. See, you got to understand that I was cut off back then. This isn't the truth anymore, right? But in terms of access to information, I was cut off living in El Paso. For long distance cost too much. Talking about long distance phone calls, right? So you couldn't just call somebody up and talk to them. You could if you had money. I didn't have money. Driving to take a lesson was more than I could have handled. So I had to figure stuff out myself, and I had to figure it out according to what made sense. So I started over. And what starting over to me looked like was going just to the lips. What was I doing with my lips? So I started, actually before that, I started the air. I spent a whole week just trying to perfect my air. I made up all kinds of crazy exercises during that time to try to get my air to smooth out. And then I did lip buzz. I think the lip buzz was 2 weeks. My first lip buzz was like this. And I knew that was the wrong frequency for playing trumpet. So my first goal on this new embouchure, whatever you want to call it, to me, it wasn't an embouchure change. It was an absolute reset from absolute scratch. And so to me, what this, I just had to take everything one point at a time and do what made sense to me at that moment. That's how I got through this. Now the result of that, because I did write everything down, and there's another part of the story that I'm not going to tell you now because it's not part of your question here. But because I wrote everything down, these ideas eventually became my method, and the method is what became the books. So the reason I have multiple books is because it's a method. The book, a lot of times we use the word method and book interchangeably, But a method is a system bigger than just one book. So really, a trumpet method is something that's not that encompasses things far beyond just a single book. That's why I've got so many books. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Now, if you were to ask me what approach I recommend, I would not recommend that approach. I did that because there was nothing available to me. So, if you are having embouchure problems, my answer to that is my method. And so, if I would begin first with maybe the physical trumpet pyramid. Read through the physical trumpet pyramid. Now you can get bits and pieces of that by looking online for the videos where I mention the physical trumpet pyramid. Okay, you can look online. But if you want the whole thing spelled out, now in terms of quality, that's not my best book, but the information is there. I might have to do another version of that book. Some of the music is kind of fuzzy looking, but it's not music you're supposed to play. That music there is only supposed to be meant as an example. That doesn't excuse the fuzzy quality, but yes, I would start by reading the physical trumpet pyramid, and then to implement that, the one range book and then my routine books. So and by reading the one range book, it should help you figure out what the other books are that you might use. But that would be if you had asked, what do I recommend? That's what I would recommend, is that system. All right. Javier, so I have a couple of questions from Sean that he asked on the website. Let me quickly answer what you guys have here, and then I'll get to Sean's question. Javier says hello. Mr. Walker says hello. Anthony says, okay. Anthony's here, so I'll say hello to Anthony. All right, so Toy says, what do you think about Lee Morgan's layback rhythm of soloing? Well, what's there to think, right? If so, look, what do I think? That's an interesting question. What do I think? I think it's beautiful, right? I think that the layback thing. So we call that time feel, and So a lot of great players do that pulling back on the beat. There is also this thing that you can do where you push ahead of the beat. Now, if you do that recklessly, then people will think you're just a bad player. But there are times when it actually has a very nice effect. But laying back on the rhythms, that's a beautiful thing. In fact, I would put that in, I teach jazz improvisation. We don't really talk about that much here. I've taught jazz improvisation for many years, for decades. Some of my jazz improv students are considered today to be some of the best jazz players in the world. I don't often say that either, because I don't want to take credit. I would rather, but it's true. And I'm not going to name who they are, not in public like this. But yes, some of the students that I have taught jazz improvisation have been some of the have become over these years regarded as they're on Blue Note and stuff like that. Uh, some of the best jazz players in the world. So, and why am I telling you that? Because I actually believe that this holding the rhythm back is an advanced thing. This is what we do when we get good enough to do that. This is not something that we just do by accident and that's a crutch or anything like that. It's actually a very cool thing. Javier says, I have a piece of music I want to start working on. It's difficult for my level in terms of speed, but not range. It's a gypsy jazz guitar, freaking fast. How should I approach it daily? Well, obviously, I'm going to say play it slow first. Hello, Sean. Nice to see you. I like to go through the piece 50 times at half tempo. And that's not 15, that's 50. 50 times at half tempo. And I'll mark in the corner of the page. I think I was actually demonstrating this to somebody the other day, so I have it right here. I use hash marks. See up here in the corner? I use hash marks like that so because sometimes it takes as much as 2 weeks to do 50 times, depending on how much time you have to go through it. So it can take, so you don't want to just like keep it in your head. And there's also something about writing it down. I don't know how much of that theory that I've shared with you guys. I'm working on a theory in my head right now about how important it is to write your progress down. I actually believe that if you don't write your practice down, if you don't log it somehow, that you don't remember it as well. I think writing it down makes your practice more effective. So that's my biggest thing is for fast stuff. The most important thing is to do it 50 times at half tempo. And people will ask me, it's so funny, right? When do I start speeding it up? And I say, you don't. And they're like, no, I don't think you understood. When do I start speeding it up? I say, you don't. And they think I'm like either kidding or didn't understand what they were saying. So they ask a third time, when do I start to speed it up? I said, hey, look, the way you learn to play fast is through familiarity. You don't speed it up because the slower you go, the more times you do it at a slow tempo, the more familiar you become. And the more familiar you are, the easier it is to play it fast. You don't gradually speed it up. When you're done with the 50 times, then you can try to play it fast. If you can't play it fast at that point, which is, that would be very surprising to me. If you can't play it fast at that point, then maybe you should try something else too. But I haven't seen that happen yet. So anyway, yes, I recommend 50 times. And by the way, that 50 times is from the beginning to the end without stop, no matter how many mistakes you make. If you're making a lot of mistakes, it's too fast. Slow it down. From beginning to end, not with no stops. And as almost like it's a performance. You could say that's 50 mock performances. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Anthony says, Eddie, I was wrong on the podcast. I was on last week's. Oh, man. Well, if it's online, we can check that out. All right. Javier says it's called Coque. Oh, wait, did I miss something? Oh, I see the tune. The tune is called Coque from the album Andreas Oberg invites Jurgi Loeffler and Ridley Chachenetti. I recommend you all listen to it on Spotify. It's such a fun song. I'll check that out. Cardo Sucks says, thanks for sharing. It's a tough experience, but a beautiful story after all. I will definitely check those books out. Well, good. Anthony said, I was on Q and A number 98. Hey, how could you get rid of an airy trumpet sound? So let me take a side step now and answer Sean's questions. The first question, let me pull it up here. Sean says, this is the other Sean, not Sean McGinty. I've seen several videos you have made regarding your high school students trying out for Region Jazz Band, whatever it's called. Is it important for the adult jazz student to learn the same literature? Absolutely not. No, do not do that. I have one student that is doing that, but there's a reason why he's doing that, and I think for now we're kind of done with that. But no, that's not. We wouldn't typically do that. Then he asks, any books you recommend for reading about jazz history and or any books at all you think would be valuable to us to read? Now the book thing. So I do have this one book that I really like. I use it a lot. It's called The Jazz Standards. This is not I wouldn't call this a jazz history book. But it's a nice jazz reference book that talks about some of the history, but it's the history of the tunes themselves. So I like to use this book. So like if I'm learning a new tune, I will look it up in here first so that my mind is in the right place for that tune. There are so many good jazz books. You know what I did for a long time? Is I started reading the autobiographies of these musicians. Now, just to be clear, what an autobiography is for those of you who don't read this kind of stuff, right? Autobiography is when someone writes their own life story, right? So an autobiography is like for example, there's a book called Miles. Now, I went through a phase where I was reading as many autobiographies as I could get my hands on. I wanted autobiographies because when you're reading an autobiography, you can hear their voice. When I'm reading, so like Miles, when I'm reading this book by Miles, I can hear his raspy voice. This one's Duke Ellington. I have some others. What else do I have? I have the one by Billie Holiday. I have the one by Mingus. There's one, let me see here. This guy is less famous, but the book, in my opinion, digs into philosophies and stories and stuff like that. And it's not a long read either. Craziology by Bud Freeman. He's basically a Chicago jazz player. And when you read the autobiographies, it gets you closer to the culture. The other stuff, the more academic biographies, right? The academic biographies are more like, and they're okay. I have some of those too. I've got a biography of Vic Spiderbeck. I've got a biography of Clifford Brown, Bernstein. I've got several biographies. But to me, you don't get that culture from the biographies. So now, as far as the history of jazz goes, I'm going to tell you that I would rather prefer to read some of the older stuff than the newer stuff. Really. Today, you don't know what kind of craziness is going on in the jazz world. You could be getting like totally political crap and not know it. And so I think it's better to get books that were written. If you're going to get a history book written about general jazz history, I would recommend making it the copyright date between 1970 and 95, just because of the politics. People stopped being true journalists and started becoming activists, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not making any comments about that, but when you're trying to learn something, you don't want that, right? When you're trying to learn something, you don't want that mixed in with it. You want, like what Sean's saying, facts, right? So, anyway, so that answers that question. Now, he had another question that he sent me in an email, and I just hadn't had time to respond to him. So let me pull that up real quick. There it is. He says, Eddie, have you ever tried Monette mouthpieces? What are my thoughts? He was listening to Dave Monette talk about them. Sounded pretty good. Okay. My thoughts about the Monette mouthpieces are, first of all, for most of my students, it doesn't make sense. Unless you buy them used. It's just that they are so expensive. And here's the thing. Most of my students don't play well enough. And that's not a slant on my students, don't get me wrong. Most of my students don't play well enough for that mouthpiece to make that big of a difference. And I know people watch those videos and it's like, oh, that must be the answer to all my problems. That's not how this stuff works. My approach to equipment is, the first thing you need to do with equipment is find the inner dimensions that match your needs. If you need so let's talk about it that way, right? Talking about Monette mouthpiece. If you need a mouthpiece that's the equivalent, well, let's not give it a brand name. Let's say the ideal rim size for you is a 16.5 millimeter inside diameter. 16.5. If you get a Monette mouthpiece that has a 17.5 millimeter diameter, that Monette mouthpiece is, pardon my French, crap to you. And I'm going to say that again. I have not used that word very often on this forum. I'm going to say it again. I'm using that word for effect. Okay? If your best diameter is 16.5 and you buy a fancy Monette mouthpiece that is 17.5, that fancy Monette mouthpiece is crap to you. So the first step you want to do is find out what your best diameter is, what your best cup is, what your best throat is, what is your best size for back bore. Before you find those qualities, the brand will never make a difference. You can't just get a big name brand and have it work for you if you're playing the wrong size mouthpiece. And the reason I say that Monette is not a good choice for my students is because finding the right size means you're going to buy multiple mouthpieces. There's no way around that. The only way around that really is for me to buy, talking about my students, right? If I were to buy one of those Warburton kits, it's a kit that has all the different sizes, and then I could have you test that, and I could have you test this, and then we could zero in real quick on what your best size is. And I'm still thinking about doing that someday. It's just they don't just give you the kit, right? You got to buy that, and it's thousands of dollars. But it would be a great teaching tool. I'll tell you that. But aside from having that as an option, finding your right size is going to take multiple mouthpieces. And if you don't have someone like me as a teacher, it's going to take more than multiple mouthpieces. It's going to take a lot of mouthpieces. Because you're going to be just like hit and miss. You'll just be like shotgun pattern. I have a more systemic way of sizing my students. Okay? So that's the biggest reason. If you were to use Monette stuff for that, you're talking about spending thousands of dollars on mouthpieces. And that just doesn't make sense for most of my students. Always with equipment, remember, find the I call them inner dimensions, right? Find the inner dimensions that work for you first. Then you worry about the brand. The brand is important only after you found the dimensions. Okay? I get fired up about this stuff. Right? Because I see people getting conned all the time to buy equipment when there's the way they're thinking is just not right. Oh, there's a pretty picture. Ka-ching. Oh, there's a pretty video. Ka-ching. That's not right. So, I hope that answers the other Sean's question. Let's continue here. Let's see, what did I miss here so far? Mr. Walker said he has to leave. He says, hope you all have happy 4th. I hope you guys have happy 4th too. If I forget to say anything about that. Break a leg. Hello, Break a leg. Nice to see you. Can you recommend a good beginner's book for trumpet? Beginner's book. I don't have anything against those essential element books. I really don't. Let me tell you, let me say it this way. I have a copy of that, I think. So these are banned books, and normally I wouldn't do a banned book like this. But when we're talking about beginners, that's a whole different philosophy. We don't even know if the beginners are going to play next week again. We don't know how long the beginners are going to stick with it, right? It could be a week, it could be 10 years, it could be a lifetime. You could be starting the next Wynton Marsalis, the next Maurice Andre, right? You just don't know. So you want to have something that's now, and here's the thing. I'm not into like entertaining students. And that's funny, right? Because my absolute beginners, I'm talking about like the children, I've had in the last few years, I've had very, very young beginners. One that was in first grade, one that was in second grade. And it's not that I want them to be entertained. I actually believe that when you teach properly, it's engaging with them, and you don't have to have the sweet talk. You don't have to have candy for them. They actually want to stick around. But on the other hand, if they're not going to be around forever, they should be playing songs so it shouldn't be just exercises all the time, right? There should be a nice mix of songs and exercises, and it just happens that these books, the beginner band books, have a perfect balance of songs and exercise. So here's the one from Yamaha. Here's Essential Elements. I don't have a problem with these two books. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I teach out of these. I have my own materials, and someday they might be books. I keep the materials that I've written keep evolving, and so for now, I don't see any time in the near future that they will become books. But these two, now the reason I like these two is they come with a CD, and I think that makes it a little bit more interesting for the children. I hope that makes sense. So that's what I would recommend, something like the beginner band books. I know that doesn't usually when someone asks me a question, I usually have a very unique answer. That's like the most not unique answer that I have. A lot of people teach out of those books. Then he says, oh wait, here we go. Javier says, yeah, the slow playing thing works like a charm. You said that before, and I never speed it up. It works. See, there we go. Confirmation. It goes against patience, though. That is correct. Something that kids these days don't have. Yeah, you're absolutely right there. Anthony says autobiography is the story of a car. Oh my. Okay, Break a Leg says I need help reading sheet music for trumpet. So, you know, a lot of cultures, we don't have this in the United States, but a lot of cultures don't let you play an instrument first. They actually make you learn solfeggio first. And if you can learn solfeggio, learning to read sheet music on trumpet becomes a whole bunch easier. Now, for those of you that don't know what solfeggio is when you do the do, re, mi stuff, right? Do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, so, la, fa, so, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, ti, do. I just made that up. But yes, that's each syllable goes with a different skill degree, right? So do is the first skill degree, re is the second, mi is third, fa is fourth, so is fifth, la is sixth, ti. Now in Spanish they always say si for that top one, which is a little confusing for me because I do chromatic solfeggio, and C is so sharp, right? So if I wanted to do G, G sharp, A, G sharp, A, C, G, G sharp, A, G sharp, G, it would be C, so, C, la, C, so, right? So C to me is something different. But in Spanish, the do re mi would be do re mi fa sol la si do. So yeah, that's different. There are different solfeggios. We have solfeggio for fixed do and movable do. I learned movable do, and I've tried learning fixed do. I can't do it. I think it's one of those things. Whatever you start with, that's what you end up doing. But that's how I strongly recommend, if you want to get better at reading sheet music, find some. Let me look up on YouTube real quick. If you type, yes, sir, it's right here. If you type solfeggio exercises, in fact, I'm going to put the query as a link here. If you click on that search that I just posted now, it will take you to solfeggio exercises on YouTube. So now you don't even have to buy a book. You get on YouTube, you click these things, and you practice your solfeggio singing with the YouTubes, okay? With the videos. What a wonderful thing. I never thought to, that's, now that I've found this, I'm going to start making my students do this stuff. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'm glad to see this. So that, I stand by that answer now. I was a little bit non-committal on that, but that's my answer. If you want to get better at reading music, learn solfeggio. All right. Sean McGinty says, I had a Monet 993. Trust me, it's still a trumpet. Javier says, I saw a 16 grand Monet trumpet a couple of days ago. That's a fee for a house. I believe that. Yep. Sean says that's considered a cheap one in the Monet world, Javier. I played Terence Blanchard's Anha, and it's a magic trumpet. Javier says Freddie Hubbard played an Eternal flugel for some time. Baker played a Getzen Capri. Those are not pro horns, but they surely are horn legends. Sean says exactly. Sean says Essential Elements was my first book. There you go. The purple one. All right. Yep. So Javier helps confirm that it's in Spanish. It's C. So that's nice, Javier. Javier says, I do the solfeggio on tonalization exercises to rest. You should try that. It has helped me a lot. So I used to do that a lot too. There's hardly a better exercise for solfeggio than tonalization, right? You're doing all of it now, right? When I tell the students about what the tonalization studies are, I often tell them that these are the building blocks of music. When you do all the tonalization studies, you pretty much cover 90% of everything you're ever going to have to play in public in terms of note combinations. And it's so much it's that much better to be able to solfeggio that stuff, right? Especially like when you start getting to the fourth, do, fa, re, so, mi, la, fa, ti, like that fa, ti. That's great. If you can sing that, you're that much farther along in your playing. Cardo says you are a lucky guy, Sean. A Monat trumpet. Wow. What about Indorbinen horns? I don't know that one. Oh, here's a good question. Cardo asks, when do you know your lips are tired and it's time to stop for the day? I have two answers for that. The first answer is if you're following my system, there are 2 days in the week when you don't stop. Okay? There are 2 days in the week when you don't stop. The whole point is to get tired and you continue on after you're tired. Okay? But it's true that you should be able to hear when you're tired. You should be able to tell. So, to answer your question, let's pretend we're not talking about those 2 days. We only know that your lips are tired because of the way it sounds. Generally speaking, a tired sound is a fuzzy sound. Right? If you start getting a lot of fuzz in your sound when you don't normally have fuzz, and I've been teaching so long, I know what tired sounds like. But yes, generally speaking, it's the way it sounds. And it's kind of hard to explain that. It's not just the purity goes out the window. It's not just that. So yes, it has to do with the way it sounds. And it takes, I guess what I'm saying is it takes a little while to learn what a tired sound sounds like. Okay? But yes, it's not, you can't feel it. If you ever feel tired, you're way beyond tired. I'm not saying that thou shalt never get that far. You might get that far on days when you're supposed to be tired. I have times when when I'm practicing beyond fatigue, and oh man, it's rough, right? All right, Sean says Cardo the Horn got more compliments than my girlfriend at the time. Wow. Javier says that's not a nice thing to say. That's funny. All right. Oh, I got caught up. All right. So what do you guys? What else? Any other questions? Yes. Anthony asked, "Is the fuzzy sound the same as airy?" And yes, that's the same thing. It's the same thing. Airy and fuzzy are the same thing. Any other questions? So we won't have the Q and A next week. For two reasons. I have something I have to do, and I want to prepare for the number 100, right? This is 99. 100 is next, and I want to have a guest come on and someone who someone like, oh, well, I'm not going to say names yet because then you guys will be disappointed. So we're going to skip next week so that I have time to prepare. I don't want to just let number 100 slip by without something special. That's huge, right? 100 of these, that's just huge. Sean says, I'll be signing up soon, Eddie. Is your schedule open? Yeah, I have some days that are open, more open than others, right? But yes, we've got some time in the spotlight. It's summertime, right? So yes, we can fit you in. I'm looking forward to working with you again. Cardo says, what happens if you go to the point of fatigue daily? Okay, here's what happens if you go to the point of fatigue daily. You just don't grow as fast. And in fact, I'm going to tell you, because at the beginning of this, we talked about my story where the graph was descending, 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 and then nuclear explosion. That was because I was going to fatigue every single day. That's what caused that. I don't think I would have had to start over from scratch if I hadn't done that in the first place. It was that my commitment. You could almost say I had a religious commitment. I don't mean that in a good way. You could almost say I had a religious commitment to practicing every single day and practicing hours and hours and hours every single day. And that's what destroyed my chops. That's what made me have a crash and burn scenario. That's what made this progress decline. Now in Romans 8:28, I'm not usually very good at memorizing scripture, but that one keeps coming up. Right? In Romans 8:28, it talks about how God uses all things for the good of those who love him, right? God used that and everything, so I'm not disappointed that this happened to me. I'm not bitter. It's there has been so much good that came out of that crash and burn. So how could I ever be upset about that, right? That is Romans 8:28 in action right there. If I hadn't had that stuff happen to me, my books wouldn't exist today. So I'm very happy I went through all that. It gave me a very intimate understanding of how the chops work. So, but that's what happens. It, when you don't take days off, you retard your growth. You either slow the growth down to where it seems like forever to get anywhere, or you start having this decline where your chops start getting weaker instead of stronger. Best case scenario, if you go to fatigue every single day, best case scenario is that you make slight progress on your strength. So I have 2 videos that address this. One is called the strength formula. If you type Eddie Lewis strength formula, that video will come up. And then I have another one called the 3 levels of rest. Both of those videos deal with what we're talking about here. Okay? So yeah, that's my answer for that. A guy named Zell. Okay. Hello, Zell. How do you know what embouchure is the best? I've got a few that I bounce between, and I don't know which is best. I'm of the philosophy that for each one of us, there is one right embouchure. And I believe that embouchure, when you find that embouchure for yourself, it's like your fingerprints, right? There's no, mine is different from yours, is different from that guy's. So the objective is not, I've always been almost offended by the idea that people could look through almost like a catalog, right? Oh, let me try this embouchure today, and let me try that embouchure, right? I've been almost offended by that because it's a distraction. The only reason we should ever try someone else's embouchure is to help us find what our embouchure is, right? The only reason we should ever look at somebody else's embouchure is to say, maybe this that I'm doing here right now is not exactly the right embouchure for me. Maybe I should try something else. And if someone says, oh, I used to have my lips puckered out, now I have them puckered in, well, try the pucker, right? Try that and see if that works better for you. In that regard, how do you know which one is best? It's the one that makes you play better, right? So if you have a good sound, that's number one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take a step back from that. That's what the traditional answer would be. Whatever your most important musical quality is, for a lot of people, that's going to be sound, but that's not true for everybody. For example, like the high note guys, sound is not the most important thing. The high notes are the most important thing, right? They're willing to accept a almost imperfect sound for better high notes. And by the way, I'm not mocking that. If that's what, I've taught students like that, right? So I've had students come to me because that's what I'm known for. I'm not known for this or that. I'm known for helping people achieve what they want to achieve. And whether that is to be a better classical player or a lead player or a high note screamer or a jazz player. I have one student, his whole goal is to play like Chet Baker. My reputation is that I help you get that, whatever it is that you want. So how do you know you've got the right embouchure? The embouchure that does for you that thing that's most important for you. So I'm just using the high notes guys as an example because that's kind of an obvious example, right? The high note guys are less interested in flexibility, less interested in sound, less interested in, now they might be more interested in volume, depending on what kind of high note guy they are. And they might be more interested in the high notes. So embouchure, let's saying hypothetically that we're talking about a high note guy, and the reason I'm using that as an example is because it's so different from what I would teach. I mean, not teach, but for myself, right? I slipped there. I would teach this to someone. That's what they want. So strike what I just said. But yes, the embouchure that lets you play high and loud is a better embouchure. That's when you can do that on your embouchure, then you know as a high note player, that someone who wants to be able to play high and loud, now you know you've got the right embouchure. On the flip side of that, if that's not who you are and you want to be like my other student that wants to be like Chet Baker, and you find the embouchure that can help you play high and loud, that's the wrong embouchure for you. Let that sink in. Do you see what I'm saying? You know, this goes in hand with that, what I'm talking about in the comeback player guide. Number 2 in that video was practice with a purpose, right? You got to know what it is you're trying to accomplish. If you don't know what you're trying to do, how do you know what right embouchure you need? How do you know what the right trumpet is? How do you know what music you should practice? You don't know any of that. You have to know what it is you're going to accomplish. What's your goal? Then we can talk about which embouchure. Then we can talk about which trumpet, which mouthpiece. Okay? Oh, I'm on fire. Javier says, any online free software to write music? Yes, sir. Don't like to do it by hand because most of my students are doing, I'm looking up here, I can't remember the name of it, MuseScore. Most of my students are doing MuseScore. And that's what I recommend. It's not bad. I don't like it because I've been writing professional music for many, many years, so I'm not a real big fan of MuseScore. But I have it so I can learn a little bit of it so I can show my students what to do. It's a far cry from the professional stuff. Anthony says, I have been practicing 2 to 3 hours a day and have a concert tomorrow, but I think I need a day off because my chin hurts a little. Yeah, be careful with that. See, I'm not into that kind of stuff. I'm not into that. 2 or 3 hours a day, and then you're going to take a break the day before. You know, that can cause some problems. I'm not saying it will cause problems. That can cause problems. If you take a day, if you're not, let's put it this way, if you're not accustomed to taking days off, that's a big mistake. And you know what? You can summarize it this way. This is what my teacher told me in college. He said, whatever you do normally, that's what you do for the performance. Don't change your lifestyle because there's a performance. And you know what? He's so right about that in so many different ways. There's the physical side of that. If you change your lifestyle because there's a performance coming up, you might do something to yourself physically that will prevent you from playing well. But there's also the mental side of that. Basically, when you change your lifestyle, you say, this thing is important. And it's so much easier to have a crash and burn mental scenario because you said this was important. Right? If this is so important, my life needs to change right now. And it's better to say, oh, it's just another day. Right? That's the better way to do it. All right, so let's see here. Neo, hello, Neo Claus. He says, hi, I noticed that you play in the red on, I play in the red on my upper lip. I tried to put the mouthpiece lower on my lips, but it kept coming back. Any ideas? I don't understand. This contradicts. I play in the red on my upper lip, on my lower lip. Okay, don't worry about the lower lip. Don't worry about, there's no such thing as in the red on the lower lip. Okay? When we talk about in the red, we're talking about the upper lip. And that's not always what it looks like. Let me show you something. There have been many, many trumpet player careers ruined because of people who only look at the outside. I don't do that. When it looks to me that maybe the student's setting is too low or too high, I don't look at their trumpet or their mouthpiece on the horn. I have them buzz in the visualizer. And I look that way. Sometimes, this is not always, but sometimes when they look like they're in the red, you put this on them and they play, and it still looks the same outside, but you see that on the inside, they've got a good ratio up lip to bottom lip going. Okay? And that's what we care about. We don't care about what it looks like. We care about what's actually happening inside. And as far as the bottom lip goes, we don't care about that. So don't stop. I would just like not even mess with that. That's one of those. There's like little trumpet pedagogy cancers floating out there, right? And there's a bunch of things that people will get like focused on that are completely unrelated to the trumpet. And that's one of those, we don't care about what it looks like. We care about what's actually happening. Sean McGinty says your lips are actually a muscle, or your lips are a muscle. That is correct. Cardo says Romans 8:28, amen. Yes. You must rest. This is a follow-up from Sean. Go play the trumpet. Just said, I just caught, try the pucker. I've had good luck with that personally. Good. I don't remember what that was, what the context was there. I'm a little bit behind on reading these, sorry. Javier says, please don't break your student's teeth to make him play like Baker. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm very outspoken about that stuff. Sean McKinney says, Cardi, I didn't understand that concept until I started lifting weights. You can only hit a body part twice a week to grow. That's why the way you practice is so essential. And then Cardo says, I understand. I'll be watching out not to kill my lips day after day. Anthony says, so practice light today, don't skip practice, and after that concert tomorrow, practice 30 minutes rest and 30 minutes rest. So I don't know that I would practice after the concert. But yes, I think you got it right. That's a much better approach. Go Play Your Trumpet says, I enjoy the range versus tone discussion. I have nothing against players studying Cat Anderson and Lynn Nicholson online, but it does seem to be, why is this? Oh, here we go. It does seem to be at the expense of tone. That's exactly right. But you know what? When we treat trumpet lessons as a business, and the customer, let's not say student now, right? The customer comes and says, I want this, this, and this. I heard you can get that for me. And the customer's this, and this is, I want to play high and loud. Well, that's what my job is to do, right? That's what our job is to do, is to help them do that. I don't, so me personally, I can't speak for you or anyone else, right? Me personally, I don't use the old academic style for teaching. You know, this I'm not quote unquote the master, and then everybody must do what I say. That's not my approach to teaching. I actually that model that I just outlined there, that's my business model, my teaching model. And it's actually, you know what, for me as a teacher, it actually makes my life very exciting. I hope that makes sense. That makes my life very exciting because I'm not just trying to get them to be part of my little Eddie Lewis mold, right? That's never been the case. I've always said, well, I shouldn't say always. This changed about 25 years ago. I used to teach a different way. But since 25 years ago, the whole goal has been to treat it like a business, have the students come in. I want to know what it is they want to accomplish, and I'm going to help them get there. Zell says, everything you say is so helpful, always insightful. You don't just preach the same old things that everybody else says. You've got a unique perspectives. Thank you for all the wisdom. It is appreciated. Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate that. So Anthony says, no, not after the concert. I mean from now on. So I really strongly recommend, Anthony, that you read my One Range book. Because that's exactly what the One Range book talks about. Okay? The One Range book is basically a strategy guide. It even says strategy guide on the cover. Right? The One Range book tells you how to alternate your days so that you get maximum benefit from your practice time. Okay? Cardo says, absolutely, Eddie is a great teacher. Well, thank you. All right, guys, so we're 15 minutes over. Like I said, we're not going to do this next week because I want to have a spectacular guest on the 100th one, and I haven't booked anybody yet. So yes, we'll skip next week. That'll give me time to get something set up. And then the week after that, we will have the number 100. We are celebrating. We are celebrating number 100 of our Q and A sessions. Javier says, thank you, Eddie. Have a good weekend. You too. Greetings to everyone. Have a nice one. Anthony says, all right, Eddie, thank you. Have a great week. Thank you. All right, guys, this was a good one. Thanks for hanging out. I'm very excited about this next one. We will see you guys next week. God bless you. Have a great week. Bye.